Say something to the last presenter.
Yeah. I'm here today with Professor Anderson, who's past president of AIBS. I'm wondering if you could restate the question. Well, here's going to be my first question to lead you off. AIBS has been going through a lot of changes here in the new millennium. What kind of changes do you envision for AIBS in the next few years?
I think AIBS is redefining itself by going back to the roots, going back to its origin. It was created about 50 years ago by biologists who saw the chemists and the physicists organizing umbrella organizations that would service all their little chemical societies and physics societies and that sort of thing. And AIBS was created at that same time, copying the model that the American Institute of Physics that had used to create an umbrella organization. And at that time, it was created to serve all of biology. And it's done that moderately effectively through its history, but it had some very good times and then some very hard times. And I think that both of those, the good times were probably worse for AIBS than the hard times, because coming out of the hard times, I think, was an opportunity to readdress what AIBS could be and should be. And since that time, the hard times were mainly associated with financial difficulties and a building that AIBS thought was a good investment and turned out not to be for housing biological sciences activities. Coming out of that, and this redefinition was the opportunity for people to say what can and what should AIBS do. And I think from that, we have an organization that I hope can meet its potential now to truly be the umbrella organization for organismal and integrative biology. The journal will still service all of biology in some general sense, but molecular biology and those areas are very well served by FASEB, another large umbrella organization. The medical sciences are certainly well served by numerous organizations, but the organismal organizations, the zoologists, the botanists, the integrative biologists, the ecologists, the evolutionists, don't have an effective umbrella. And AIBS was that, was supposed to be that, and I think it can now very effectively be that again. And that's really important for the future of those areas of biology, because all the individual little societies are important to their membership, but each of them is small and does not have a voice when it comes to common national policy, support for science in those fields, direction of education programs in this era, addressing the problems that have been created by people seeing religion in conflict with evolution, for instance, which it's not. All of those kinds of things can be coordinated and worked on much more effectively through the umbrella that AIBS provides. And so I think coming out of the good times, but especially out of these hard times, will be the umbrella organization for organismal biology that can really be very important for the next decade, the next 2 decades, the next century, we hope.
Is AIBS growing?
AIBS has been of various sizes throughout its history. It is now at an unprecedented size. There are 70 member organizations. That represents a growth of probably nearly 70%. It had some hard financial times, as we were talking about with the previous question, and during those times, the membership in AIBS dropped down into the 40s, the number of member organizations. I think it was in the 40s, and in the past 2.5 years, more than 20 organizations, most of whom should have been members of AIBS, but perhaps dropped out because they didn't see it serving their society's needs or were concerned about its financial status. New members have come in, old members have rejoined, and now there are, I think, just about exactly 70 societies that are part of AIBS. So it has enjoyed and I guess has enjoyed unprecedented growth in the past 2 years, probably faster growth than any time in its history, at least to my knowledge. And that, again, I think is important because it provides the base to allow AIBS to be the service organization. And that's what it is. It's not a primary society, it's a secondary society, or secondary organization serving primary societies. So the officers, the staff of AIBS has to keep that in mind all the time. And so the larger the base of those appropriate organizations, the more effective it can be.
You've just come out of a meeting with all the presidents. What are the early accords?
The first large meeting in the new AIBS was a President's Summit, which was held in Airlie, Virginia in November of 1999. This was a huge undertaking for AIBS. It has a history of 49, previous history of 49 large national biology meetings that became known to many of us, me included, as the AIBS meetings, the meeting that everyone went to. But some of the key societies that participated in that decided to hold meetings on their own. And AIBS, in redefining itself, decided that it might try to organize some different kinds of meetings. The first of these was the President's Summit. And the important part of the name for this meeting is that the apostrophe is after the S. So it's not the summit meeting of the president, I was the president at the time, but a summit meeting of the presidents of the member societies. So the ownership is for all of them. And this was a meeting designed to, and supported by the Packard Foundation, by the way, designed to find the common ground among those societies for the issues for the next decade or so, and to help AIBS find the ways in which it could serve those societies more effectively. We were really worried about that meeting because we didn't know in this new format how many organizations would show up. And we also designed it to be a meeting of the presidents of the societies because we wanted the chief spokespersons for each of the societies to come so that when they said they would participate, they thought this or that was important, that there was some way to follow up on that with individual societies. So we were asking presidents of individual societies to come, not the Washington area representatives, which are much easier sometimes. And we didn't know how many would come. More than 50 societies. At the time, AIBS had about 62 or 63 members, and more than 50 societies participated, sending their presidents, and it was the most amazing biological meeting I've ever been to. Not in terms of the science, because that wasn't the focus of it, but in terms of organismal integrative biologists, ecologists, evolutionists, systematists, people studying functional morphology of plants and animals, got together to decide how they could work together to promote education, to promote public understanding of the kinds of science that we work on, and to promote government understanding of the needs, the priorities, the directions, the aspirations of those kinds of biology. Coming out of all of that meeting then was what we call, because the meeting was held in Airlie, Virginia, at a historically very important place for getting together parties that often disagree, which was not the case with our group, but has been the history of that site, I guess, are agreements, accords that we then call the Airlie Accords, which represent the agreements among the societies that participated for the things they considered most important to do together and for AIBS to help facilitate getting accomplished.
For you, what was the most important of those accord agreements?
I don't know which is the most important of the 11 or so prime agreements that we came out of the meeting with. I think actually the most important thing for all of those societies and for AIBS is that people agreed to agree. And in fact, the individual things that we're working on are each important in their own way. I think probably public policy is the one that's most obvious because each of our individual societies does a pretty poor job because we're built on volunteer work of inexperienced persons, scientists who don't really work in the public arena in terms of promoting science. So that I don't know that any individual agreement, as much as the agreement to agree, the agreement to work together on common efforts, was the most important thing by far. And I think it set the stage for the very successful meeting that we're having in Washington now, this March 2000 meeting, which is focusing on the science and looking back, looking at the present, and looking at the future. But again, it's many societies working together, hearing from the luminaries in the various fields that are represented. So the most important thing from Airlie, I think, was getting people to see that it was in their society's best interest to really work together, not to just talk about working together. The 11 Airlie Accords represent the areas then in which that common effort will be focused. And if I was forced to choose one, I would probably say public policy. But I'm not sure that education isn't just about as important as that.
This meeting is an outgrowth of the new AIDS. What's been your favorite moment of this meeting?
I think the favorite moment was having together in one place representatives of such a diverse array of societies coming together to honor Ernst Mayr, perhaps, the doyen of animal evolution, one of the world, perhaps the leading evolutionist alive in the world today, together with Ledyard Stebbins, who just died, the leading evolutionists in the plant and animal world. So I think seeing how people could imagine themselves meeting together and working together under this common umbrella of ideas was the most exciting thing.
What's AIBS's immediate future?
AIBS's immediate future, the very immediate future for AIBS is later this week to reconvene a group of the presidents who were involved in the Airlie meeting, the President's Summit in Airlie, Virginia, to talk about the next steps, to implement some of the ideas that were raised at those meetings, the accords that were drafted, so that we'll try to determine where we can go next and how we, if necessary, generate the resources to be able to follow up on those. And then in the more distant future, it's organizing other focused meetings like this very successful March 2000 Millennial Meeting in Washington.
Thank you very much for being with us today.
Okay.